what's really frightening is they're now into the world of cannibalism. To be into that world, there has to be someone who's sacrificed, obviously, or you wouldn't have cannibalism. Sacrifices, cannibalism, certainly the SRAs are all over the place. Los Angeles was the #1 producer of pornography. It's a place called Chatsworth, California. We've known this for years. So therefore, that's one of the reasons California has a curse on it. Recently, and I want to share this with you because most people don't know it, they have moved out of California, not because California doesn't agree with sexual perversion. They'd love to have more of it. They were trying to stop the spread of venereal disease and so forth, so they issued this law. You had to wear protection. The porno filmmakers didn't like that, so they allowed moved out. They've gone to New Orleans. So you have New Orleans right now, most people don't know this, is one of the largest congregations of porno filmmakers. And why am I saying this? Because now it's moved into what we call close to middle America. Okay, soon what you'll see in the next 10 years, they will move from there. They'll keep it there, but they'll move a segment across somewhere right into Heartland. Behind every production of pornography, if you search deep enough, you will find these women were SRA victims. They are program multiples. That's how they're able to do it. The guys are also program multiples, but some of the guys are actually the demonic pimps. They're the ones that are doing the satanic ritual abuse, which goes right back to a form of human sex trafficking. You break the person's brain up by abusing them, and then you put them into the world of doing what you want them to do. And what's that called? That's called trafficking.
From victims of ritual abuse, the testimonies, we've heard some really horrific things that are just beyond the imagination. This is a lot of times why nobody believes the testimonies of these children. They're too fantastical. No human would do this. We've heard this over and over again. The story that we hear all the time is they put my hand on the knife and they put their hands over it and they made me do the cutting. It's on and on and on. And get just the most horrific things that you couldn't even imagine. These children, they wouldn't know this stuff. How could they make this up? How could they know that such a thing exists except for to have experienced it? So just the most horrific things that you could have ever thought up and beyond that.
I know the most horrific thing that I've seen the after effects of in person. You would think I would say a child in a cage, or children, or people handcuffed and held prisoners for the purpose of abuse and as sexual slaves. You would think that. But it's not. The most horrific thing that I see in America is the acting out and the manifestation and the carrying on of satanic ritual abuse in homes today, right in front of our faces, and yet no one's acknowledging it. So you have a housewife that's a program multiple. I know because I talked to a lot of them. I've interviewed many of them, and they're screaming out for help. And society's just marking them as a crazy person. They need to go off and get drugged and whatever. Yet living in their house is their husband. I've had in 2 cases that was part of the satanic ritual abuse. So in other words, my answer is, what's the most horrific is that it's happening right here in our neighborhoods, next door. And nobody's acknowledging it. Nobody's standing up against it, especially the church.
Nancy Yarborough from Fresh Start Learning says this can happen to any family, in any house, in any neighborhood.
We always think that it's happening in a kind of like a traditional poverty issue. We forget that it happens to the vulnerability of a child. So that lies in the heart of any child.
And trafficking is starting younger and younger. The Human Trafficking Task Force of Greater Milwaukee says the average age of a victim is 13.
But we know there are a lot more trafficking victims are starting to come up that are at least 11 and 12 years old.
Shanda Shear. Shanda was a 12-year-old girl that was met by, I think, 4 other girls about her age, maybe anywhere from 12 to, I think the oldest was 17. They were friends of hers, supposedly, and they asked her to come out with them. They were going to go riding around, you know, things that girls do, young teenagers do. But they decided they were going to take her, Shanda, up into the woods, put a blanket over her, beat her to death, and set her on fire. Why? Because one of the girls accused Shanda of liking another girl and they were jealous. That's just the face of it. That's not what's behind it. It's demonic. Again, we're talking program multiple. You can't have 4 girls just go out and do this. I'm sorry. You might have 1 and you have 3 stopping, or you might have 2 and you'll have 2 stopping, all 4 falling into it. Shanda was my cousin, and just 4 weeks before that happened, I was looking at her beautiful brown eyes, so precious, you know, so innocent. And it's the last time I saw her alive until I got the phone call that what had happened. This was almost 30 years ago. I didn't know then what I know now, but now that I know what God has given me, and to, I believe, many Christians in this day and time, is that I look back and I say, no, this was these were demons. This wasn't 4 girls getting together and beating someone to death, setting them on fire. This was demons, satanic ritual abuse.
I think there's a few reasons why people, the common man, might be deterred or disinterested from further investigating claims like this, or the Epstein conspiracy. I think that people are deterred. They're scared of being labeled a conspiracy theorist. That's kind of just this broad stroke general title that's been given to demonize anyone who would suggest anything really other than what the mainstream media is force-feeding them. And people don't want to be labeled that among their friends. They don't want to be thought of as, a tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theorist. And I think another reason too is they might feel like they don't really know where to start. There really is a lot of disinformation online. There's a lot of sensationalism. There's a lot of people not bucketing evidence correctly, or they'll find 1 or 2 pieces of suggestive evidence and come to a guilty verdict prematurely, and it kind of turns people off. Like, where do I go? Where's a reliable source where people aren't going to sensationalize these things for me, where I'm actually being given credible information? Another reason for the minority might be that they're scared to talk about it, especially on social media. That was the case for me. I was scared of what the implications would be if I posted this stuff. Would I start being surveyed? Would my house be surveyed? Would I be being tracked somehow? Would my conversations be monitored somehow? This stuff's not uncommon. Would I happen to just go missing or commit suicide if I started posting videos about this stuff?
Is the work dangerous? Yes, it's dangerous. Are we fearful? No, we're not fearful. And we're not, boastful about anything. I'm just not going to give evil more time a day in sensationalizing what they're doing. One has to be vigilant. One has to be prudent about these things. You have to surround yourself with people who are like-minded, people who actually want to fight this crime to end it. I'm interested in a place, a country, a nation that is the greatest nation on earth, the United States of America, where freedom reigns, where every life has value, agnostic of their belief system, whether they believe what I believe or not, whether they affiliate with my political affiliation or not. We fight for every child, the Muslim kid, the Hindu, the Buddhist kid, the Christian kid, doesn't matter. Because we're doing it for the right reasons and we've got great support, we are confident that we're being smart about it, but we're not going to pull any punches.
And I really don't think that people have a hard time believing that it's likely, because the Epstein didn't kill himself meme is proof that the majority of people, especially in the online community, especially those who are active on social media, have a general understanding that world elites, people at very high levels of political power, have some kind of interest in sex trafficking rings or pedophilia or something to that effect. That's the reason we can all embrace the Epstein didn't kill himself meme and believe it. Nobody believes that official story. Nobody. We all know something fishy went on. We all know this, but we feel sometimes like we have to whisper about it to one another. We can't really be public and bold about it because of what the dangers may be in speaking out against it.
These kind of crimes only exist when it's allowed to exist. We're fighting a battle of good and evil. The battle is not in flesh and blood, it's spiritual. And so there is a defiance of God in our culture, in our country. And for those who are Christians who understand the Word of God, this is where it's going. There is an ultimate spiritual battle over every single human being. A lot of these occults and their rituals, whether you are in the cabal or whether this is part of a sacrificial pact that people have to make in blood sacrifice in order to be a member of a certain society or a Satanistic cult, there are sick people, very twisted people that have made an absolute agreement with evil, like I've made an agreement with Jesus Christ. I've made an agreement with salvation. I've made an agreement that He died on a cross for me, that I am saved. There are folks in our nation and in the world that make agreement with the other guy. To ignore that fact or to think that it's just too grotesque to be real and just turn a blind eye is ridiculous, right? It's hypocritical, actually, because especially in the faith, in Christianity, say, well, if you're going to make an agreement that the blood of Jesus, by His blood, you're washed clean. Do not for 1 second think that the enemy that's against Him does not want to blaspheme and use blood of the sacred children to perform other rituals. It happens in our nation and it's happening on people's watch.
At this point, I was starting to feel really convicted. I mean, I'm talking to people who are on the front lines in this fight against this horrible evil. And I've heard of child sex trafficking before this whole endeavor, but I never really did anything about it. I largely ignored it, just like a lot of people out there today ignore it. But I was feeling like I was even worse. I had less of an excuse, because I work for a company, Skywatch TV, who runs a ministry that helps kids who come out of child sex trafficking. They help them heal. It's called Whispering Ponies Ranch, and I've always thought it was a great cause, but I myself never really got involved with it. It just felt like a topic or a cause that was too big for me. Yeah, I couldn't get my head around it. It's too disturbing, and I have kids. I just couldn't imagine all of that stuff. Well, I had a conversation with my friend Joe Horn, who helps run Whispering Ponies Ranch, and turns out he knew exactly what I was going through.
To me, the idea that a person could be so morally depraved, completely bankrupt of any humanity whatsoever, that you could actually take pleasure in the ritual abuse or trafficking of a child, to see a child suffer and to somehow that. Let me just say that for most normal people, it sends them into a delirious rage. For a lot of years in my own life, this whole conversation, pedophilia, the ritual abuse of children, was so overwhelming to me that it literally just kind of exceeded my threshold and would shut me down, emotionally shut me down. There was a time I recall my wife and I sitting at a church service where a missionary had come in and he was talking about this work that he was doing overseas in the proactive rescue of children that were being trafficked and abused. And I remember sitting there the whole service with a sense of guilt that I had never confronted the issue myself or done anything to assist ministries like this financially or otherwise. But I remember being so knotted up in my stomach, so overwhelmed by the prospect that the things he was alleging could be done to children were happening. It was so overwhelming emotionally that I didn't do anything proactive at the time. I remember thinking, Lord, I'm so grateful for ministries that do that, but as a father of four, I just cannot allow my brain to dwell upon these things. It's just beyond my ability to reconcile how a person becomes such a monster and is capable of the types of things that this minister was sharing, that other than being emotionally overwhelmed, I just kind of put it on the shelf. I'm thankful this is somebody else's ministry, but I myself don't even know where to begin in my pursuit to do anything about it. Therefore, I'm going to focus on the ministries that God has called me to do. And as I look back, I feel like that was a very convenient, almost kind of cowardice place to land. And one day, after we had our own guest on Skywatch TV, Opal Singleton, she's an expert in how pimps profile teenagers, grooms them for the use of trafficking and the exploitation of sexual abuse.
60% of kids in prostitution come from foster care. The FBI will tell you there are more than 1 million predators online at any given time. These predators know exactly what they're doing. They're looking for somebody maybe with that's exploratory. They're really looking for somebody who's sexually active, if you kind of put something out there, because you're easier to kind of lure in. It depends on whether they're looking to hook up to exploit you or to groom you to put you into prostitution. And believe it or not, that is the bulk of the ways that human trafficking is happening. In Southern California, most of our kids never ever thought of themselves as ending up in prostitution, but they get lured in and then it all changes very quickly for them.
I was really grappling with the subject material again. Lord, this is so beyond my threshold. I can't spend my daytimes thinking about this stuff. It's beyond what I can do physically, emotionally. My threshold is spent. But it was like the Lord tapped me on the shoulder and he said, yeah, but you know what, Joe? Your unwillingness to confront this issue doesn't make it any less real, and it doesn't help the victims of its abuse. That download trumped any of the feelings that I had felt before about being overwhelmed and paralyzed, and I had to become proactive. I could not just cheerlead for those who are confronting this problem from the sidelines anymore. Lord, what can I do? How do I get engaged?
Talking with Joe really helped get my head around this whole thing. The only reason child sex trafficking has been allowed to continue is because people ignore it. Otherwise, good people ignore it. They act like it's not happening or it doesn't affect them, or like I once did, they think that it's too big of a problem or it's too evil, it's too disturbing. But that attitude is exactly the problem. Like Joe said, it's a convenient excuse so we don't have to get involved ourselves. All these occult connections with child sex trafficking showed me what looks like a curse over America. Really over the whole world. But that made me think too, if there are dark forces that are being fed by this stuff, they wouldn't care if people believed in them or not, as long as they were getting fed. And because of the inactivity of good people, they are getting fed. This is continuing. But then I finally learned some good news. That this